Digital Zone 22 online. Thank you so much for having me. It's my first time here, so I'm really excited to be with you all and share my point of view on this topic. I think we're going to have a great time today. So I'm Heather Physiok. I have been at VML Y&R since 2014, and my role is to serve as the Managing Director of Discoverability. And that includes 3 different capabilities. I'll talk about that in a second. Sorry, give me just a second here. I'm having issues seeing my material. Once I fix that, we'll be good to go. Okay, there we go. So VML since 2014, I lead the discoverability capability. My background is journalism, and I also have my executive MBA from Rockhurst University. I do a lot of teaching and writing and speaking in the industry, and I actually work at a university teaching digital marketing at the master's level. So I'm really excited to share some of that with you all today. Discoverability at VML Y&R, we have 80 or so experts around the world in 3 different disciplines: organic search, paid search, and performance content. And we have talent on our team in 5 global markets so far, and we expect to add more in the very near future. And we serve about 70 different clients at any given time. And we bring these 3 capabilities together into this cutting-edge, award-winning, interdisciplinary model that I'm really proud of, and hopefully I can share some of those learnings with you today. And we worked with brands across all different verticals in all different global markets, all different sizes. And so I want to share the things that we've learned that every marketer can benefit from, whether you're in-house or agency side or a freelance consultant, no matter if you're a small business or an enterprise multinational corporation. Every single one of us experiences the obstacles that I'm going to talk about to building a content process. And all of us can put these techniques to good use. So come on a journey with me and tell me if this sounds familiar. So you get a new client relationship and you start to talk about how you can take them to the mountaintop. You start telling them that search is a long-term sustainable investment. You tell them you can help them achieve their goals and get more customers, that digital marketing is great for real measurable results when they could be putting their dollars into something else. You can see the summit from here and it looks awesome. So you get to work, you're doing technical SEO, no problem. You worked hard to team up with your developers or get CMS access. You're checking those items off the list. On-page SEO, awesome. You're all about it. You can optimize their web pages all day, especially using stuff like what you're learning right here at Digital Zone. Maybe you're managing their local listings and you're just knocking it out. It's easy for you. You're doing all these great best SEO best practices and basics. You're clearing out those big cleanup projects and the low-hanging fruit. But now the remaining big gains come from creating content and experiences that your customers want. Right? But marketers often hit a wall with their clients when it's time to create content. Maybe the client goes quiet. Maybe you can't get sign off. Maybe that money gets allocated to something else that they think is more important. And maybe your content requests are staying in a queue that never gets prioritized. And the road to getting a content process up and running has many pitfalls, but 101 level SEO best practices can only take your brand so far. We need to connect with our customers through content that satisfies their needs and helps solve their problems. So when these obstacles appear to creating content, we have to figure out a way forward. Doing our best work depends on it. So where do things go wrong? When there's a lot of different things that can go wrong, just a few, we tend to tell clients that creating content is this always on exercise, which our clients hear as a never-ending expense. Or there's tons of dependencies for a content process. And so there's a lot of places that the process can break down. You need resources, you need buy-in, you need approval, but you have to put in the work to align those things or you're going to run into problems. You also have the challenge that every stakeholder says that they need content for different things, and those reasons don't always line up. Creating this Smooth, efficient content process to produce a consistently high level of quality is very difficult to achieve. And it's often the biggest blocker to many, many SEO programs. And it certainly puts us at risk of falling short of our promises to take the client to the mountaintop. So I was digging into industry research. I surveyed the industry and I interviewed dozens of subject matter experts across all different digital marketing disciplines. And a few patterns emerged, but the biggest one was that not everyone agrees on what content means. Content means so many things to so many different people. Creative thinks of content differently from digital. Social thinks of content differently from search. Clients think of it differently from marketers. Brands think of it differently from sales, and so on. There's this fundamental misalignment of the definition of content depending on who you are. In fact, I asked 100 marketers to define content, and I got 100 different definitions. Now, none of the answers were wrong. All of this is great, but each of the definitions varied so widely, and therein lies the problem. Now, I'm not here to define content for you because it can mean so many different things, but I will give you a different way to talk about it with your stakeholders that can help get their alignment and buy-in. So this is one of the most common places where I saw that understanding diverged. It's the difference between campaign content and continuous content. So let's look at some of those differences. Now, these are not mutually exclusive traits. These can exist in both places, and there is a place and a purpose for both campaign content and continuous content and everything in between. But it helps to align stakeholders on the impact of content and to choose the right content for the job to be done. So for campaign, that content might be aspirational. It's push marketing. You're trying to inspire someone to action. It should be very memorable and creative. Whereas continuous content is all about the consumptive audience, what they want to consume. So you're going to flip that aspirational thinking on its head, and instead we're doing pull marketing. So we need to understand people's needs and wants, and we need to fulfill those needs. Campaigns often center on creativity and memorability, whereas continuous content might be more functional. It might be better used to answer questions and solve problems for customers. Campaigns tend to be push messaging, pushed outward to the world via different platforms and media during set periods of time. Now, continuous content is more often owned content that lives permanently in the owned site experience that we're drawing people into. Campaigns tend to be more brand first in that they try to establish identity and unique selling points about the brand and the products in their customers' minds. But continuous content is demand first. This is that supporting content that we create because we saw our customers ask these questions in the search data, or we expect that they will ask these questions in response to the campaign material when it runs. And this content can live in many different formats and places, and that content exists even after the media dollars stop. And finally, campaign content tends to be very short term, and it has a very high production value. So it makes it costly to create just a few pieces of great content for a short-term campaign. And that level of effort wouldn't be sustainable for long for ongoing content creation. It has to be leaner and cheaper and faster for the volume of content you need to create to win in digital. So now that you have this lingua franca that you can work with and that you can get your stakeholders to agree on, that's a great first step, but you're only at the beginning of your hike. You still have to get people to want it, to contribute to it, and to approve it. And it can be very difficult to convince people that content needs to be a priority. So content gets excluded from scopes, even though it's a very critical part of your digital success. Or client executives aren't convinced that it's as worthwhile or as impactful as something else they could do. Or there's red tape in the approvals process that slows your content production to a crawl. And I wanted to know why this was. Why does this happen so often? And all of these different industry surveys, including my own, found issues in the content process ranging from lack of budget to lack of time, from getting buy-in and approval to proving the ROI, Marketers complain that they can't get high quality, affordability, and scale when they're producing content, and the list goes on. So marketers everywhere report having trouble with almost every part of the content workflow. In-house, agency, independent consultant, doesn't matter. Just about everyone who works in search or digital experiences this. And when these world-class marketers can't get past this hurdle, your results slow down. Your clients are unhappy. The scopes get smaller. People can even lose their jobs, all because we can't get words on a website. And many of these problems are just symptoms of a few root causes. So for example, here are 4 causes I saw again and again. The first is territory. Everyone wants a seat at the table, and everyone wants a piece of the client's budget to create great content. And everyone thinks they own content, but remember, they might be thinking about what content even is completely differently. Another obstacle is ownership. Everyone thinks they own content and has needs and opinions, but no one department owns content. So everyone ends up creating content in silos, and rogue content pops up all over the place. You need clear ownership to connect those dots and make it a cohesive process and experience. Which leads me to process. Often there's no connection between those workflows. When I sat down with those subject matter experts to interview them in different disciplines, I asked what they believe content is and what it needs to be, where their pain points are, what the perfect content system looks like. And I examined their answers for the things they have in common and the things that they see differently. So many of the tools you'll see today have helped bring more clarity and more connection to those content processes based on these insights. And finally, I have someone at my door. And finally, sourcing that content, creating that high quality content affordably and at scale. Now, you don't always start off at scale, but everyone has to start somewhere. So I'll give you some tools to think critically about what content is worth and where to start that's right for your needs, including AI as a potential source for content, like what Katie just told us about. Okay, so today I'm going to focus mostly on continuous content creation, but know that many of these concepts can help your campaign executions be successful too. And I found these 3 assumptions helpful to set the tone for improving content process and making great content happen. First, you have to keep in mind that content matters for many stakeholders and has many different applications. So a great process should make content work in many ways. Second, your mileage may vary. There are a lot of variables including in your situation versus my situation versus someone else's, different resources, different relationships, different talent, different purpose, different competitors. There will never be a one-size-fits-all approach, so it has to stay flexible. And finally, content formats and platforms are changing constantly. We know that Gen Z is turning to TikTok more as a search engine, but a lot of folks still start with Google and traditional search engines. So any tools we create have to be flexible, adaptable, and content agnostic. So now for some tools and techniques to prove the value of the content you need to stakeholders and to start building some structure into your process. I apologize if you can hear my dog barking at the door. Hopefully it's not too noisy. So first, proving the value and importance of content to stakeholders. You're going to define content and where it should live. You'll convince the relevant stakeholders to care about your content. And I'll give you some tools to make the business case for content, like a cost-benefit analysis. So you have to make it matter to your stakeholders. Usually website traffic alone is not enough to convince your clients to invest in content. A lot of times the website is actually the least of their concerns. They have bigger fish to fry, like profit margin or market share or shareholder value. But marketers will often promise KPIs for their digital channels that have little meaning because they aren't presented in the context of that big picture that the client actually cares about. So here are a few tools to help the client see the value of continuous content investment. So this is a model you can use to demonstrate the benefits of campaign versus continuous content in a clear, digestible way and how they work together. So smart campaigns get really big spikes in visibility, but when the media dollars stop, the visibility stops. Continuous content, though, excuse me, continuous content, though, is a steady source of visibility and engagement. It drives real business results, supports the campaigns, it grows itself over time. And together, when you use these techniques together, you can make those spikes more spiky and those dips less dippy. And so that helps keep brands relevant long-term, even when the media dollars stop. And when done well, content is clearly a fantastic investment. So next, this is a tool to illustrate what happens next. So you can show the clients when you've gone as far as you can with the basics. You celebrate the wins, you highlight your best achievements, and you tie that growth back to the work you've done already. And then using real data, realistic projects, maybe case studies, excuse me, to show what will happen in the future. So after a while, if your client isn't creating and optimizing new content to expand and meet more customer needs, an unmanaged site can eventually go flat or even decline as your competitors are starting to encroach. And there are many great resources out there to help you make these reasonable projections based on your data and your situation. This visualization just helps you make it make sense to clients. Here's a different model for you. So a marketing budget is a zero-sum equation. Everything your client chooses to do with their budget comes at the expense of something else. So help them make a smart choice by showing them the value of their investment in content or any channel or exercise, really. So you can compare metrics that are meaningful to the client, make sure that they're things that have an actual business impact for them. So this example here compares the cost per click of paid search in the category, this actual client category, which rises each year. That cost per click to get a customer in the door is increasing every year for this client. And we compared that side by side with the client's potential investment in continuous content for search, how much traffic we think that we can earn for them if we focus on certain keywords or topics, or competitive white space, and thus what the organic search cost per click could look like. Now, my intent here was not to disparage paid search, but rather to demonstrate that organic search is just as valuable of an investment. And so using the available models and tools, we can estimate the potential traffic growth based on how much content, what subjects we're planning to create, and in which competitive spaces. And here's a different tool, and it's just storytelling. Telling the story in a way that connects digital marketing to sales and the customer experience. So here's an example from a US-based life insurance client. A 2017 J.D. Power study showed that about 3/4, 74% of insurance shoppers are going online to research information, make informed decisions, compare brands, and seek quotes. And all of this happens before they ever talk to a live human agent. Customers still want to talk to a person to close the sale, but to keep those live agents busy, we need to fill their pipeline. And to fill their pipeline, we need to fulfill searchers' needs. But when we evaluated the content on their site, we found that only 1% of the content addressed the needs of these customers who were researching. We analyzed dozens of examples of topics where this brand's top 4 competitors rank in the top 100 search results, but the brand doesn't. And we looked for patterns, and it revealed 3 big gaps. There were questions like how much it costs, what does it cover, can people have 2 policies, is life insurance a good investment? We did the same exercise about annuity statements, borrowing against life insurance and critical illness. And we found that this was a great place for clients, agents to share their point of view, to provide expertise and service that builds trust. And finally, we found that the client had a few good content pages at the 101 level, the very basic level about life insurance, but there was so much room to expand into educational topics like these, where we don't currently appear in search results. Even their informational content, that 1% of content they did have, was very broad, very high funnel, and then it would jump right to a call to action. So we're missing all of this need that customers have in the middle. And so telling the story in this way instead of just dumping a spreadsheet of keywords on them, helped us to educate the client that before we ask customers to share their contact information in a lead form or talk to an agent, we have to answer some of their questions and build that trust online first. The next tool to use in conversations with clients is maturity modeling. Every business pretty much is in business to earn money. And so this is a rough content marketing maturity model that shows how they can improve their process over time to creating content more efficiently and effectively that nets better results. So it ranges from reactive content creation, which is very ad hoc, it's unplanned, maybe there's not a lot of thought that goes into it, to strategic on the high end. It's fully integrated across channels. Content is a key part of your digital strategy. It's part of your DNA. Most of our clients that we've engaged with tend to start in this tactical space where they're creating content in silos and there's just not a lot of connectivity, but there's an appetite for content. So we use this tool to show the clients where they are on this maturity curve and why. And then we help them understand how they can tactically move up that curve and get more mature in their content production. So it helps to identify where they fall on the spectrum, where they could be, and how you could get them to that next stage. It just makes it feel more clear and attainable instead of that never-ending expense. Okay, so we sold the client on continuous content investment. Now we need a system that brings it to life in a way that is sustainable, repeatable, and scalable. And it needs to be easy to adopt and to adapt, including all the right people and pieces. First, and this is a resource you can take and make your own, but first, I cannot recommend enough how important it is to create a single central source of truth that grows with you as your ways of working evolve. It could be a lot of different formats. I'll talk about that in a second, but this central source of truth helps even the most dispersed teams stay networked and produce great content with more accountability, more speed, and more quality. So this document could include your scope of work. It could outline the process and the roles and responsibilities. It could include a reminder of what your content strategy is, templates for content briefs and copy documents, legal and approval guidelines, and more. This tool makes sure that you are setting clear expectations and that your best practices travel. So for many of our clients, this is like a shared slide presentation link that we just always add to. For other clients, we might use more of a wiki type tool, like a Confluence, for example, to just keep gathering information all in one place. And here's another tool for you. All of those subject matter expert interviews, I pulled this big list of activities as a starting point for you to start achieving absolute clarity in your process. It really helped me to design these tools for our team by pulling from what everyone needs to be successful, not just what my search team needed to be successful, which increases the likelihood that you're going to successfully implement this process. Now, I want to be clear, you don't have to do all of these things to be successful. Although it's great if you have all of these things, it's really just a tool to decide which steps and which parts of this process are right for you. So do your own interviews among your own subject matter experts, and you might learn some really interesting things. Discuss with your own stakeholders and pare it down to what your initial minimum viable product would be for a process, and then build on it together going forward. So you'll agree on an approach, you'll launch it, but then you're going to learn from it and constantly refine it. So to achieve that absolute clarity, hashtag absolute clarity in your content process, make these resources part of your central source of truth document as well. Many of you are probably already doing this, but if not, I do strongly advise you to adopt a content brief as a North Star for each piece of content you create. So you can, once again, work with other subject matter experts and stakeholders to find out what everyone needs to be successful and make it as lean as you can in this resource. Store the template in your central source of truth, of course. And that helps everyone know what to expect and move faster. It saves a lot of wasted time and just makes everyone's jobs easier because you have everything you need in one place to get started. Your content brief may look totally different from mine, and that is okay. But a few of my favorite fields to include, I like to include the purpose of that piece of content. Like, what is the point of creating this? Just to remind us why we're doing what we're doing. I like to include a primary call to action because I want to make sure every piece of content has another action that follows, keeps our customers engaged in that process. And then because my background is search, I, of course, love to use search data and social listening to understand the questions that content should answer. Our writers love having that in there. It just makes writing easy. Target keywords. And then I like to reference what our competitors are doing or not doing to make a better page. If this sounds really hard and maybe complicated to you, I get it. It's true. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into this, but a truly high performing continuous content process requires continuous effort. It takes patience, communication, persistence, openness to change. But doing this keeps you more competitive than the competitors who can't, won't, or don't put in the same effort. Not everyone has this many resources, but I promise you these tips can help even the leanest and most scrappy marketers. You may not have as many resources to help, but that also means fewer places for the process to break down. And not everyone has the budget to create lots of content. Quantity of content isn't necessarily the point, but that's all the more reason to invest some time into the things that make the process smoother and make the content better, because it gets cheaper and more productive over time. So this toolkit can be like the scaffolding that you build better ways of working upon. I hope that these reduce some of the friction in that process so you can get great content created. All right, next is sourcing content. So budget is limited. You have to make hard choices. You need to put effort where the limited resources will have the most impact. So I'm going to give you some tools to decide which production method is right for your needs and how to have productive conversations with the people who decide whether you get the resources to create content or not. So this is a classic make versus buy decision model from business school, mostly. So the big question is, do we create content or do we outsource the creation of content? The answer could be one source, multiple sources, or a mix of several sources. You have to consider what your resources, limitations, and blockers are, and weight those needs heavily when choosing the best approach to recommend to your client. So think about the criteria and evaluate how each potential source of content meets those criteria. So let's address a couple of examples with pros and cons. So for example, what would it look like if we used campaign creatives, those people who do the big push marketing campaigns to create ongoing content? Well, on the bright side, they would be amazingly creative. You would have exceptional control of the message. It would be completely custom to the brand, the audience, the platform, and you're probably going to have media dollars behind it if you're using campaign creatives. But on the downside, they tend to be very short-term, single campaign focused, not ongoing content machine. So they'll be very involved for just a few pieces of content, but it could be very slow and expensive to execute because of that. So it might not make sense for a continuous content system. What about outsourcing to a third-party content creation vendor like Skyward or Textbroker or something like that? So one positive is that they're very focused on the specialty of creating content. And that focus allows them to get efficiencies and economies of scale that others may not. They can often ramp up quickly and temporarily when you have a big influx of demand, and they can scale back when you have less demand. That's harder when you have to hire full-time employees, you know? And a lot of times these vendors will have end-to-end systems that help you route things for gathering inputs, proofreading, getting approvals, and things like that. On the downside, it is an external partner to manage, and that can be tough to ensure quality and consistency. So there's still extra effort you have to do on top of that. But the cost of an outside vendor could also cut into your profit margin. What about machine learning or content automation solutions like what Katie was telling us about? Some of the early perks that we're seeing, it's automated. It can be easy-ish. It can generate content for different platforms and formats very quickly. And one hopes that it learns and improves over time. It requires more effort up front to sort of build that machine and get it working well. But both the machine and the operator behind it learn over time how to make that work better for us. But on the downside, machine learning and content generation is limited by our inputs and the feedback loop that we give it. It has no human judgment that clients trust to gut check that content and provide the best ideas. And so quality control can be challenging. So once again, there is still a great need for a human element to manage even machine learning solutions. And finally, we're going to talk about how to streamline the approval process. So you're going to define ownership and volume and timing expectations. You're going to reduce friction in that feedback process, and we'll emphasize flexibility of the digital medium for future change. So there are 3 big tips I want you to take with you on how to accelerate the approval process. First is setting expectations. You want to create clarity about how much content you expect to create. How often will they see new content to approve? How long does each stakeholder have to approve that? Because the next step depends on them. You want that to be crystal clear and agreed on across the team. Next is giving them context. So a lot of times approvers will receive like spreadsheets or copy documents, but it's not quite enough to put the work into context. It makes it harder to understand how that work will be used. So I want you to help them understand at a glance how it will be used, show your thinking for how you arrived at that content, and visualize what that work will look like in reality. And finally, I want you to log what you learn. Don't make the same mistakes twice. Every error slows down the approval process. So as you're getting feedback and learning new things, keep track of what you're learning and make that information available to all in that central source of truth document. So as far as that first part around setting expectations and establishing that process, when you're setting up that system and expectations, consider what your stance on bottlenecks is for this client. Sometimes bottlenecks can be helpful. If content is all over the place, out of control, you have inconsistent messaging, maybe you're cannibalizing one another, content is bloated and no one is calling content and taking it away, you might benefit from some bottlenecks to kind of enforce a system. Just beware that creating more steps and more approvals means more time and more places that process can break down. You want to try to eliminate bottlenecks over time, but you might need them at first. What I see more often is we need to reduce the need for approvals. And so that governance guide, that central source of truth, can be really helpful to ensuring that when it gets to approvals, it is already in a good place to be approved. Logging what we learn and adhering to all of the proofreading, product, and legal guidelines that they would be looking for. And so when we have clarity on that process, on whose approval is needed, how quickly they're going to provide it, and what happens if they don't, and if they do approve, where does that go? Having that clarity allows us to check back on that process, see what's working, what's not, and refine. And I really love this tip. This is a hat tip to my friend Jason Dodge at Black Truck Media in Michigan for this tip. He actually offers to the client to move forward if the approver doesn't confirm their approval in the agreed upon amount of time. So say the approver has 3 business days to approve it and you don't hear back, then we're going to go ahead and move it forward and publish it because we know it meets all these criteria. Your client may not allow it today, but as you continue to work with them and build trust and routine, they may become more open to it over time. And that can greatly accelerate that content marketing process. Another tool is to create an approver's guide of sorts that just briefly reminds them, what is this content? Why are we doing it? How does it work? And what did it go through before it arrived at your desk? What kind of rigor have we already applied? So I might, in that approver's guide, also mock up what that content is going to look like. So here's an example I've made up here using a retailer page, and I've highlighted the areas where our content will live, so the approvers know what to expect and what they're looking at. Or here's an alternate version of that where we show the content on an owned website experience, for example. I think it's so much better than a copy document or a spreadsheet to helping them process what you're doing. And remember this is our central source of truth. I know I keep coming back to it again and again, but it is such a powerful tool. It is a living document, a central source of truth that grows as your ways of working do. So again, even the most dispersed teams can coordinate and produce great content that everyone feels great about. All right, so let's bring it all home so you can carry these things with you on your journey. First, make it easy for your stakeholders to see the value of content. Put the numbers to it, make the reasoning clear, show them the benefit and the why. Second, define and align your process with collaborators. Don't do it in a silo. Don't think exclusively for search or exclusively for social. Think about how it all plays together and who all the people are that need to make this work really, really well. And then revisit that and refine it often. No process is precious. And finally, use the tools that you have, including the ones that I've shared in this talk, to create #absolute clarity. Create absolute clarity at all time. I really hope that these tools and these techniques and these thought starters will help you to achieve that absolute clarity on your journey. I'm Heather Physiak. Thank you so much for having me. If there's any time, I would love to take a few questions.
Thank you so much, Heather. Actually, before telling anything, firstly, I need to say that how much I like the design of the deck and the fonts and the presentation. It's just perfect. I'm kind of a guy who just focus on the graphics very much, and
nice.
I'm very addicted about it. So I really like it. It's very nice.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we have some really great templates thanks to some of my really great colleagues, and they made it easy for me to build.
Great. So thank you again so much for all your effort, and your presentation was really enjoyable and great and kind of educational, to be honest. And I think most of people think the same with me. We still have some time. If we have time, we have like 4 or 5 questions.
Oh my gosh, yes, I would love to.
Yeah, great then. So I can read it to you if you like.
Sure, that'd be great. I'll pull this up so my contact information is up, and then let's go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, let me start Jennifer's question. It is a little bit unrelated, but here's my question. Do you think is there a potential SEO traffic on TikTok? It's been so popular and agencies are running lots of ad campaigns. Did you have a chance to check if there is a potential organic traffic or for SEO? She asked something like this. Do you have any experience about TikTok or any chance to see anything about?
Yeah, great question, and very timely, very relevant. We're especially seeing the youngest generation, Gen Z, adopting TikTok as one of many places that they start a search. There's a lot of hype around it, and we're certainly thinking about what is our approach to social discoverability, because it's one of the many platforms where people search. So I think that's important for us to know and understand. But I want to be clear that I do not see a world where TikTok surpasses Google. I don't see a world where TikTok even makes up the majority of search for Gen Z. I just don't think it's a thing. But there's also a lot of risks with TikTok as a search engine. So I work a lot with like health and medical type brands. And there are very real concerns about the reliability of medical information that this younger generation might be getting from search. So there's also an element of responsibility to doing it. So I think it can be a tool for the right brands, and we need to be thinking about how to create content assets that can live there for the right brands too. But I would caution marketers from going too hard and putting too many resources into that one channel, especially if it doesn't quite make sense for your brand or your purpose. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. So let me tell you the other question. We always consider the non-brand organic traffic instead of the brand traffic in e-commerce industry, but most of the conversion coming from the branded keywords. Any chance to increase the search volume of the branded keywords without spending high amount of money?
Yeah. Honestly, brand is one of the places that you can play that should cost the least, right? Because you are the most relevant person to talk about your brand. Other brands are not. So even in paid search, we know that branded queries are more affordable to bid on. But in organic search, I think there's just a wealth of opportunity that people leave on the table. So part of our content process is that search intelligence or that keyword research up front. And we'll usually look at branded search very differently from the non-branded search. And when we're looking at the branded, we're looking at the questions that people search for about that brand, about their competitors, when they're comparing. I've got another talk that I do all about competitive advantage that I think has some really great tip. Maybe I'll bring it to Digital Zone next time, right? That talks about how to find those ways to win that are really clever without requiring a huge investment. And I think if you are the brand, you have the best shot at capturing that territory. And the search intent around branded queries tends to be very different from that non-branded experience as well. I hope that's helpful, but there's definitely a lot more we could talk about that in a future talk.
It's a very wide topic, and I think it was very good enough for the question. And for the next one, hi Heather, thank you for the amazing presentation. We are running a website like a forum, and most of our content is user generated. It helps us to get many organic traffic, but we face a lot of quality problem, like many thin pages and too many duplicates. What is the best way to keep this under control?
Wow. Yeah, I have definitely run into that before. And it's a tough one because user generated content is so valuable. Like you don't want to hide it, but it can really inflate the size of your site with a lot of not great content. I ran into this it was like a finance and investing industry brand. And they had this big forum space. Like their whole identity was this forum or meeting space. And so almost all of their content was user generated. There's no one answer to this. There are a few ways to do that. If you're trying to harness user generated content as it comes in to make it more valuable, you may change the questions you ask people when they're entering content. Is it an open comments field, or are you asking a question like, what were your thoughts on this product, for example, or how did this product help you solve X problem? You can kind of steer the answers to make it more useful and relevant. There's always the option of what am I trying to say? Canonicalizing the thin, weak content to maybe more valuable, more relevant head pages. That can kind of consolidate some of that authority. Gosh, I could talk for days about the different ways to manage this. One thing I'd also like to say about user-generated content is it makes a great input, a great source of information on what people are talking about, and thus what kinds of content you should create better and more evergreen resources for. If you see that a lot of people are talking about the side effects of a certain medication, maybe that's a sign that you need to create a page about that to talk in more depth with more authority on that topic. And then that page will overshadow some of that thinner, weaker, and more duplicative content.
Yeah, I also totally agree with you. If it brings lots of organic traffic, then just keeping it under control with many technical audits and strategies like this, it's kind of a key. And this is our final question. Do you think it is logical to write all the product descriptions with AI? For example, it helps us to create alternative text for similar products. It's normally so hard to make changes in a content for similar products as an editor.
Yeah. So we write a ton of commerce content. So this is right in our wheelhouse. I think we are definitely exploring different AI and machine learning options to help scale it. But we are finding that AI alone is not the best source of very strategic, intelligent content. It's all dependent on our inputs, of course, but what we found with e-commerce content in particular, it's better to use our human strategists to capture all that data, to make meaning from it, to decide where the content should live and what it should contain. And then they'll usually create the first template or requirements, right, from that human lens for the main product. But if there are additional variants like sizes or color or things like that, I think that's a great use for artificial intelligence solutions, because they can spin out those variations very quickly. That's repeatable, that's automatable, and it doesn't necessarily need as much human intervention. But even all of that content, right? So I think AI is a great solution for variations. And like when you have to produce a high volume of very similar content. So for example, we work on a consumer packaged goods brand that has a lot of food products that are very repeatable. There are 400 variations of the same can of beans, for example. So AI can be a great solution to capturing all of those little variations like color, size, or flavor or something like that. But there's still human setup that's required, and there's human review that's needed to ensure that content is high quality before we would ever publish that in a store experience. I don't think we've reached the point where we can create all of our content using AI solutions, but we're definitely exploring how we can fold that into our process alongside the strategists and creators that we have.
Yeah, so it's kind of a tool to help us to make our job easier, but can't be trusted to create all the content without any control of any editor or something, I guess.
100% agree. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you really much for all the effort of you and your amazing presentation, and for your great energy, morning energy. It was very great for us actually. So I hope to see you next time in person in Istanbul for our next Digital Zone. And thanks for joining us today here.
I would love that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Reach out anytime. I'd love to hear from you. I really appreciate it, Digital Zone 22.
Thank you. We are the same. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.